It's Kuntze. She's a freelance writer and in-house content manager at Content Insights in the UK. And together with Juan Señor, whom we are very happy to have him back on stage, whom you already heard in the morning, they are going to talk for the next 10 minutes on balancing editorial instinct with technological innovation. We are deeply looking forward to your conversation. Em and Juan, the stage is yours.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's my pleasure to see everybody here and also to welcome Juan back to the stage. As kindly introduced, I am Kuntze. I am a writer at Content Insights. We're up in the networking area. And this afternoon, I would like to plumb the depths of Juan's considerable knowledge and experience working in various newsrooms to find out how we can navigate the prickly line between editorial instinct and technology at a time when technology is able to do some fairly significant things. So welcome, Juan. Thanks for joining me. Just when we were having our conversation a moment ago, you gave quite an interesting definition of journalism, which I think is worth paying attention to, lest we lose sight of it in modern times.
Sure. Yes. Yeah, I will define. Yeah, there you go. No, we were talking about the importance of nowadays, when we're talking about reader revenue and getting back to basics, to reflect on what is journalism. And I just read George Orwell's 1984, and there he quotes, he says, journalism is to publish something that somebody does not want published. The rest is public relations. And I think it's so relevant to this day and age, and I think so relevant to the discussion of metrics. Because often newsrooms are slaves to metrics and to trying to publish things that will be popular, the cats, the crashes of kids and skateboards and so on. And really, if you do want to have a journalistic soul to your brand, you need to go back to publishing stories that somebody do not want published. On a regular basis, occasionally, if you don't have that editorial teeth, it's very difficult to really get onto substantial metrics.
So how would you advise people to start balancing the kind of editorial instinct that would allow you to write those stories with the metrics that might be telling you to push the viral content?
Yeah. Let me also share with you another great quote. This is from Rory Sutherland, who is the vice chairman of Ogilvy. And he said it just 2 weeks ago in London. He said, a CEO should use data as a drunk uses a lamppost, for support, not illumination. And I think it's so true. So data is extremely important. In the newsrooms that we build, we have a team of analytics, and their job is in the morning meeting as part of the daily routine to constantly feed the newsroom and tell them what is tracking, what is working, and what isn't. The problem that we've got at the moment is that there's too many things that you can measure. So you have to choose very carefully what it is that you're measuring and make that part of the daily morning, or it's no longer a daily morning, there are several meetings throughout the day, but if you have one moment where everybody comes together, data should be given a voice and should be indeed be made part of the conversation in a very meaningful way. The Financial Times has done this for many years. They call their data team Betty. They humanized it. So they took all the data, all these guys, they're all statisticians from Oxford and mathematicians. And they said, well, for journalists to begin to have an interest in how their stories are tracking and what's working, what's not working, let's just humanize the analytics department. In other publishers, they call them the audience team and so on. And so they call them Betty. And you could be John, you could be Mary, but during the morning meeting or during the meetings, you're Betty. So Betty, what's going on, what's working or what isn't working? But getting back to measuring some very basic things is very important to get the newsroom focused and so on. We tend to use three. So Auto Globo in Brazil is a major newsroom with multi-titles. They have several magazines, newspapers and so on. The biggest newspaper in Brazil. We just opened the newsroom there. And we narrowed it down to three metrics. Before they were measuring 7, 8. It was too much for the newsroom to focus on. And the driving metric or the common denominator to all these metrics is time spent. Really today is time spent. If you're still measuring page views, unique visitors. That's just not the game. The game is time spent, how much people are spending. And that's really for us the true definition of engagement today. Time spent with a verified visitor who keeps, and if he returns, even better. And depth of scroll is very important as well. So, but that is tied to time spent, because if you keep reading it. And another very important metric is the morning metric, because if you win the morning, you win the day. So a lot of people obsess about metrics throughout the day. Look at the morning, because if your audience is waking up and engaging with your content, they're likely to stay with it throughout the day. So the bouncing rates for your emails, your newsletters and so on are very, very important for you to keep an eye on and have certain benchmarks as to what's acceptable, what isn't. For us, less than 40% opening rate on a newsletter is not acceptable. You should increase that, and so on and so on. But keep it simple. Just keep a few and use them for support, not for elimination. Because you have a story that tracked really well, editorially, okay, let's do more of this. That's facile journalism. The instinct of a journalist should still prevail, because what is tracking today, metrics is a rear view mirror. Yeah, you're looking back. It's no guarantee. It's like financial investment. Past performance is no guarantee of future performance. So it's done very well. Yes, okay, that's great. But if we do this other angle on the story, it may do very well as well. So, don't be driven by it. Be informed by it.
Obviously, the remit of this particular conference, we've got a lot of focus on the magazine sector of the publishing world, and you've been speaking about news. How important is it, therefore, to tailor the kind of metrics we're talking about with the remit of your publication, newspaper, or product that you're producing?
Well, I think it's very applicable as well. I mean, because metrics are essential for you to measure whether you've been able to change the biorhythm of your publication. The big problem we face with most of our clients, particularly magazine ones, is that they have to change their biorhythm. If they're a monthly magazine or weekly magazine, they work towards that product. And then they do a replica online, and then they pretend throughout the rest of the week that they're actually doing proper, fresh journalism. So I think the challenge is for you to come up with metrics that measure whether on a daily basis you're offering content that is engaging or not. If you're still, if you have metrics once a week or once a month, it really is a daily obsession, and I think is just as relevant, for hard news journalism as it is for lifestyle journalism, for health journalism, for fashion journalism, for hobby journalism, and for professional journalism. People consume content on a daily basis. If you like classic cars, why not have a daily fix of classic cars, and why not measure that on a daily basis and have the same obsession with that? It's not because it's news-driven we should measure it more. I think it's not. It's inexcusable that you don't want to have an ongoing conversation with the person who follows the hobby. Sorry.
That too? I'm sure there's a niche
that too.
somewhere.
I am a bit jet lagged. I just got back from Hong Kong as well, and hobbies as well. Yeah, and follow that hobby, and you have an ongoing conversation, and you should try to measure it as much as you would measure a news-driven story about that hobby that you cover on an ongoing basis.
So I suppose wrapping up, because I'm conscious of the time, how is it best to start integrating this more universally into the newsroom?
Yeah, well, the physicality of this is very important, because it is zeros and ones. And again, a lot of these guys are mathematicians, statisticians. We had one client that paid their analytics team more than their editorial team. These are expensive people to get a hold of and to retain. They're not cheap, and everybody wants them. So the first thing is to build a team, have them as physically as close to your central desk or super desk or editorial hub, whatever you call it, where the real decisions are made. And they need to be consulted on an ongoing basis. They have to be statisticians, mathematicians, marketing types that are willing to and are not afraid to have conversations. So they have a a journalistic gene or a little bit of ink running through their veins, that they do want to tell a story, or you must encourage them to talk and to come to the central desk or the editorial department and say, oh, this story you've done on Trump legal troubles, that's really tracking, but for this reason, rather than what you expected. Okay, that's interesting, thank you. And so on and so on. So they should be able to have that level of openness and so on. And then the other very, very important thing about an analytics department that is data-driven and all this is that you use them cleverly to recompense editorial achievement. So, any journalist worth his or her salt really wouldn't do a story just to get traffic. But when they do, you must celebrate, because that touches their ego. And it's very important to feed their ego and to tell them, my gosh, and I've seen it in a morning meeting where somebody was told, your story was the most read yesterday. People spent 8.5 minutes. And they go, oh, 8.5 minutes, wow, yeah. It's great. And it wasn't about cats. It wasn't about, a silly BuzzFeed listicle. It was proper good read. So use the analytics department as well. And also the reporting line is very important. They should report to editorial. Yeah, not to marketing, not to whatever, sales, distribution. But they should also be able to give data to the marketing department if they're doing a branded content campaign. How well did it do? How many people click through to make a purchase or something? But you must have a clear reporting line to the head of the newsroom or the head of the editorial department. These are not an appendage that is sort of, you borrow from marketing. They're part of the newsroom. And without that full integration, you really will not get to measuring really how well you're doing journalistically.
That's really fascinating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.